Mr. Mai. So, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to you here this afternoon. My name is Alan Costello. I do have two hats. My day job is I work in venture capital in climate and resilience and energy. It's not like there's anything going on in energy at the moment. But what I'm here to speak to you today is about Natural Capital Ireland. It's an NGO that I've been the chair of for the last number of years. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the concept and the organisation. But there's two little burrs I'd like to put in your mind just before I start speaking, because they kind of set a bit of a tone. Just at lunchtime, I heard that the Isle of Man is the first country in the world, or the first state in the world, to classify digital data as an asset. And assets sit on balance sheets, and that's a very interesting conversation for where I'm about to talk about nature. And the second is, if I'm going to be maybe a little bit cheeky in this, I flew in last night. Actually, I live about 60 miles west of here because I grew up on the Irish Sea, and I've often looked over at the Isle of Man from the Mourne Mountains and the Cooley Mountains and always wanted to visit, so delighted to have the opportunity. And I came in through the airport last night, and I always take a little bit of a sense check as to what's going on when I look around at the posters that are in the airport. And there was maybe 12 posters advertising wealth management and lawyers. And there was one advertising the biosphere. So that's kind of a tone of where I might want to go and where we might want to see change in all of our Celtic region countries and all of our countries besides over the next time. So I'm here to talk about Natural Capital Ireland. It's a non-governmental organisation that seeks to value, protect and restore the natural capital and the natural ecosystem services that exist in nature for the benefit of the Irish economy and the benefit of all of the people that live in the economy. And I'm going to make a distinction between the words, the A of accounting and approaches, the A of approaches in a little bit of time. But Natural Capital Ireland natural capital is a concept that allows us to value the effect and the benefits that nature provides to us in what we consider to be the more mainstream economy. It helps us to understand the dependencies that we have on the wider nature view. Now, there's probably examples that come to mind. We've been hearing for the last few years around in a biodiversity realm that bees are great pollinators and that there's X% of global food production depends on bees as pollinators, and that's true. That's part of natural capital. Natural capital is also things like the marram grass that I think are probably over on the north of the island on the beaches, preventing the island being washed away and saving that land and saving that agricultural land. Natural capital is also about carbon preservation, about land management, about agricultural yield optimization. So we try to put a value on it, but natural capital very explicitly is not putting a price on nature. It's not a case of saying that copse up in the hill is worth 18 million euros worth of benefits, so therefore there can be an offset to that, dig up the copse and we can put something in its place. It's not about putting a price on nature, it's about understanding the value that nature offers us to the wider economy, be that the financial economy, be that the manufactured capital, the social capital that we have. We're funded in a couple of different ways, which I'm only pulling out both in thanks to our sponsors and because I want to make a point on it. We're funded by in core funding. We're funded by the Irish government through the Department of Agriculture, Food and Marine, because it makes sense. And we're funded through another government department who has an agency called the National Parks and Wildlife Service. Again, it makes sense. And we're one of the very few organisations that a government in the current climate is giving core funding to in order to just enable us to exist. And we supplement that work with that funding with grants from some philanthropy. We earn some income at low cost by delivering products, services, research reports, research reviews that I'll talk about in a few minutes' time. But that idea of having multiple sources of funding, it also speaks to our type of organisation. We came from academia. Natural capital accounting is a concept that has been developed globally, but is probably advocated through a number of universities. So we were originated out of Trinity College in Dublin. We work very closely with UCD, who you've already heard from this morning. When we set up the Peatlands Finance Ireland, or helped to set up Peatlands Finance Ireland, that was with UCD. We're currently doing a project with the University of Galway that's actually also linked with a French and a Dutch university. We also bring together government. So we've started working with the Central Statistics Office. We've started working with the Department of the Environment and Climate Action and our core funding departments. But we also work with industry and corporate, and there's a lot of funding coming through to the sector from large technology companies. Again, we've heard from their influence today on our country in Ireland at the moment. So that diversity of funding is both giving us a little bit of resilience, a little bit of sustainability, but also allows us to hold people's feet to the flame when we need to. And we don't shy away from even pushing back on government if they're not doing enough around natural capital or enough around biodiversity management. So natural capital, and if there's economists and accountants in the room, they'll have heard that the language coming through here, that it's a metaphor for nature. That we're talking about the stock of renewable and non-renewable resources that exist in the world, and how we treat those as a flow of services delivered to people. So that's immeasurable and probably identified in a pounds, euros, and dollars value that comes upon it. It is a missed a slide somewhere. It is a UN globally recognized accounting standard that yields us a number that we can start thinking about. Nature's nice. We like walking in nature. We think we probably get some nice things, but there's a value to it that we can now ascribe. To put that a little bit in context, I was Googling the other day, the GDP of London is about £600 billion. The value of natural capital in the UK is £1.8 trillion. But we've never before been able to have a way of ascribing and understanding the value of nature and what that offers us to the wider economy. But we think this is really, really important for the private sector. We think that businesses and corporates and ultimately governments will start to care more about this. They already do. This kind of ideas will have originated from things like the carbon trading markets, which we're probably a little bit more familiar with. And the carbon trading markets are on a voluntary basis at the moment, but they're moving to a statutory basis. Nature credits and biodiversity credits are a new and emerging discipline where restoration of projects or maintenance of nature projects can actually have a nature credit attached to them, which can be traded on the international markets and bought by traditionally, or you can't say traditionally for an industry that's only been around for a couple of years, but are being bought by technology companies and being bought by large industry, not as a panacea to cure all of their ills and sins, but as a supplementary way of showing that they are able to give back, to show that they are trying to support the nature and the communities and the environments that they are working in. An example of that in Ireland is Microsoft have spent a number of millions of euro restoring and re-wetting the upper source of the River Liffey, where it starts off in the mountains in Wicklow before it ends up going in through Dublin City. So there's a couple of million has been put to work there. Another large data center company is putting 3 million to work restoring and re-wetting and rewilding the peatlands in the middle of Ireland. It's not attached to a data center planning permission. It's not a requirement in order to be able to do business and conduct their business through the Republic of Ireland. But it's something that they are moving from a voluntary or moving from a CSR. And where we wanted to move to is where it moves, where the capital markets are going to seek to reward those business processes and those corporate entities that are doing good work for nature, good work for environment and protecting the wider ecosystem that we're all living in. We think investor pressure will come to bear. Yes, there's some changes in the short term at the moment. There's some changes at the moment, but things like the SFDR classifications that are coming out from EU and classifying all of the investment funds depending on their role in driving better ecosystem benefits, better nature benefits, better climate benefits, the cost of capital. If I take it down to the smallest examples, the development of green bonds into the mortgage markets for when the houses and the dwellings and the domestic places are upgraded to a better class, you get a lower cost of mortgage. So these kind of tools that have existed in the market for maybe 8 to 10 to 12 years, we want to see them developing a little bit more. They're more of the drivers that are happening around natural capital. And we think there's consumer pressure. We think that there is both, we've heard earlier on a fantastic exploration of the B Corp from the holiday letting companies in Cornwall. And we heard that that's about the communities, we heard that's about the staff and the employees and the retention of those employees. So we think these type of pressures around companies, corporates, entities, and all the way up to including governments is going to come from we the people. those who are most interested in the environment and nature, restoring it, first of all, protecting it, and then developing it back to a more sustainable way that it was before. So the way that Natural Capital Ireland does this is we convene, we connect, and we collaborate. It's a nice kind of alliteration of what we do. We're a very small organization. Our turnover is in the couple of 100K a year, but we outperform in terms of our effect of what we do with that. So we connect people together. So things like the research program where we have developed natural capital accounting for river basins or for forests, or we're in the middle of doing it for seagrass across 5 countries. We brought people together to be able to do that and punch a little bit above our weight in order to achieve that. We convene groups together. So the couple of government departments asked us to form the National Task Force on Natural Capital Accounting in Ireland. And what that was about was from the Taoiseach's office, from the Prime Minister's office, to try and drive a whole of government approach to natural capital accounting and how that gets brought into their thinking and their planning and their delivery of services. And we're extending that into the private sector as well. And we have a resources and education element to what we do. So I said that we came from the university sector, as most of the natural capital entities around Europe have done. So we, in the next number of years, we are going to train over 500 public sector employees on natural capital accounting. We're going to train and work with a number of individual corporates who have a disproportionate effect on natural capital. People like the water utilities, the power utilities, the big land managers. And we're going to work with them quietly, discreetly, not in public, to understand what it is they're doing, what they can do, and help them to implement that. So that kind of education underpinning piece that's coming into natural capital. Some of the past projects that we've been involved in, in case, examine the entire natural capital accounting of a river basin in Ireland to understand what was there, what benefits it provided in terms of pollution management, water management, flood management, what kind of biodiversity was in that space. And that work has now been replicated by one of Ireland's largest agricultural co-ops around a river basin that they effectively manage down in County Wexford, so that they can understand the value that dairy corporate is getting from the nature that they would ostensibly think is free or available or a resource to take. Now they're going to understand a little bit more about what it is that they're doing. We set up Business for Biodiversity Ireland a number of years ago, which kind of does exactly what it says in the tin. It's going to train hundreds of SMEs around biodiversity elements that they have that pertain to their business and how they can help and develop it a little bit more. This is, let me be a little bit flippant here, this is more than putting a beehive on the roof. It has to be the right bees. It has to be, what are we doing in the business? What else can we do in the community? What damage are we causing by the work that we do that we can't just wash under a rug by sticking a beehive on the roof? So Business for Biodiversity Ireland is a big part of that education piece. We have been involved in, with KPMG, we did a big piece of work around the National Biodiversity Action Plan, which is a mandated, legal, binding process around what the government have to do around biodiversity to measure it, to support it, to develop it, and augment it. I'm very excited by our current projects. Bioregioning in the southeast, that was supported by a philanthropist who wanted to understand where all of the different sources of financing this type of nature work can come from. And we have identified over 150 different sources, and not individuals, but sources of funding where money can be found to put back into nature. FORAS is work that we're doing for forests, what we already did for river basins. The Green Building Council is a consortium that we're pulling together to help understand how we can develop buildings and construction in a way that matters for biodiversity, and ultimately using natural capital as a mechanism, as a lever for doing that. Really excited by our work with Uisce Éireann, which is the Irish water utility. There is only one water utility in Ireland, and they run the whole public water, drinking water, wastewater system. So they are the biggest users, biggest maybe a single entity that are concerned with natural capital accounting. Things like putting in reed beds and natural beds of filtration and sewage treatment, rather than having to build an enormous water treatment plant, which is going to have societal impacts. There's ways of doing it by nature, there's ways of doing it naturally that Irish Water are exploring and interested in. And that major project that we're working with an Interreg across Northeast Europe around seagrass. So this is our first exploration into the marine environment, where seagrass is an enormous benefactor for the biodiversity of nearshore marine environments and around carbon capture. And we're going to be developing test beds in Holland, in the northeast of France. Don't quote me on the exact county, the exact state of the northeast of France, Galway, and off the east coast of Ireland as well, to understand the value that seagrass can bring to natural capital accounting. So the message that I kind of like to leave you with, and I'm going to be staying on stage anyway, you're stuck with me, because we have a panel coming up. The natural capital is an accounting system. It's an economic system of understanding the value that nature is bringing us as a business system or as an island ecosystem. And it's a way of not putting the price of nature, but about understanding the value that it offers to us so that we can protect it a little bit more. Many, many thanks, or mille briacas, as we might say if we're going to go the Celtic Nations route. Thank you very much.